See a red button that says record.
Wonderful. We're off to a good start then. How you doing today, Nick?
Doing wonderful. 6 takes, I hear, is the lucky number.
Good. Well, it seemed to work on the sixth try, so I think that is sage advice you've gotten in the past.
Yes. If at first you don't succeed, try 5 more times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've heard that once or twice in my life. Maybe
So
more.
today we've got a blog to do today, Nick. Right? We have a little hiatus, which
Yes.
sometimes happens, kind of over the summer, and then kind of us both digging back into a new academic year. But we're back, fired up, ready to go through a blog, and we'll have a couple other recordings for folks as well coming up here real soon.
Yes. Tons of combat. Oh my God. Tons of content dropping after the big trip out west. So this blog is going to be a good one. I am very excited. I've already read it because I did. So why don't we hear
Wonderful. Good. Well, let me go ahead and read through it, and then we'll take a few minutes and talk about this a little bit. Over the years, I have interviewed many applicants for graduate counseling programs. I recall one applicant in particular named Jake. He was in his early 20s, in good shape physically, with a friendly, outgoing personality. He had recently graduated with his bachelor's degree from a very good university. His application indicated that his grades from his undergraduate program were excellent. My first impression was that he seemed kind, intelligent, confident. He evidently had taken the advice to heart that he'd been given in the past to give a firm handshake when you meet someone, because he squeezed my hand quite hard and held it for at least 5 seconds when we met. After a few pleasantries, I prompted Jake to share with me the reason for his wanting to become a professional counselor. He responded by saying, "I want to help other people by giving them good advice." He continued on, telling me that several of his friends in college who had come to him for help over the past few years and how his advice had solved their problems. He proudly revealed, "People tell me all the time that I should be a counselor." Jake is just one of many counseling applicants and counselors in training I've talked to over the years who've expressed something similar. While I appreciate their heart for wanting to help others, there are some real significant problems with this line of thinking when it comes to professional counseling and perhaps many other leadership roles. Let's take a closer look. Jennifer presents as a kind, quiet 11-year-old with auburn hair. She's been referred to counseling because of a poor relationship with her new stepfather named Bill and her emotional outbursts at home and at school. As she shares some of what's been happening with you, it becomes clear that she's still reeling from her mom and dad's recent divorce and has now been thrust into a sudden and, for her part, unwelcome relationship with another man living in her home. She describes herself as depressed and describes her stepfather as mean. She exclaims, her voice rising, "Sometimes I just lose it." And after sharing all this, she looks at you and says the most dangerous 4 words in counseling. "What should I do?" Now let's get back to Jake for a minute. You know what I fear well-intentioned Jake would do? Jake might respond with statements like this. "You need to spend some time talking to Jake and getting to know him." Or, "You need to tell mom how you feel." Or, "You need to control your emotions so that you don't get in trouble." Or, "You could take 10 deep breaths and think about how the things that you are grateful for." How about this one? "You need to get over the divorce and take control of your life." You should, you need, you must. I worry that Jake would confidently tap into his huge reservoir of wisdom and reveal the specific steps that Jennifer must take to fix her life. So you likely surmise by now that I'm not a fan of those responses. Well, why not? What's wrong with Jake's approach? Well, I've got a laundry list of reasons, so here we go. Number 1, if the advice works, it's the counselor's success, not the client's. In this scenario, success would likely boost Jake's confidence and self-image. I'm not so sure that's what Jake needs, and it certainly wouldn't be helping Jennifer. Jennifer may feel like she just isn't smart enough to solve her own problems, and she needs the help of a man like Jake to solve them. However, if Jennifer has at least helped to come up with the solutions, then it would be more her success, not Jake's. This would encourage her autonomy and could boost her confidence and self-image. How about another one? If the advice works, the client is drawn back to the counselor to tell them what to do the next time they have a problem. This encourages dependency. While Jake may appreciate the job security, we want to empower Jennifer to work through her own problems throughout life whenever possible, not run back to Jake to tell her what to do the next time she runs into something difficult. Here's another one. Quick, too simple solutions often don't work and or aren't long-lasting. If the solution were really that simple, most people would have figured it out on their own and or through trial and error. Jennifer may very well feel invalidated by the straightforward advice and perhaps even shamed by the suggestion that she failed to figure out something so simple and or do it on her own. Jennifer's a smart young lady. Her family situation is unique and complex. Long-lasting solutions are not typically easy or simple. While small steps can help things to improve, there are many factors to consider. Even small changes will likely impact the family system in different and hard to predict ways. Preparing for how to respond to the side effects of change can be a vitally important part of counseling as well. Here's another one. If the advice doesn't work, it's at least partially the counselor's responsibility. Imagine if Jennifer tells mom that she hates Bill, and mom responds by slapping her across the face. Who's at least partially to blame for that? Well, you told her to do it, Jake. Let's keep in mind that Jennifer's a preteen in our scenario, and it would be developmentally normal for her to reject advice or direction from adults, however well-intentioned and or however sensible. By telling some kids what to do and what not to do, we may inadvertently prompt the very opposite. That's yet another reason, right? That adolescents and or anyone of a more disagreeable personality or demeanor may be apt to reject advice and simply do the opposite of what a counselor suggests. And I got one more. If the advice doesn't work, this could foster a sense of helplessness. Imagine how poor Jennifer will feel and how she will think if she does her best to do what an adult counselor told her to do and it still doesn't work. She is cooked. So as you can see, whether the advice works or not, the approach is problematic. I need to add a few additional things that concern me in regards to Jake's desire to become a professional counselor as well. First, aware that Jake's overconfidence in himself and his wisdom might be overcompensating for some deep-seated insecurities. He may be outwardly expressing himself like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, but that may be masking inner anxiety and turmoil. Convincing out others how strong and brilliant he really is may help him to feel better about himself and soothe those inner insecurities. If other people think of him as a genius, then it might really be true, he may think. We sometimes call this a superhero complex in the helping professions. If Jake can rescue Jennifer, that makes him feel really valuable and important. For some people, this natural high can be a form of self-medication for those very insecurities and inner turmoil we mentioned earlier. Or perhaps Jake doesn't really have those insecurities, and he's just super proud of his brilliance and his abilities. Do you know anyone like that? I do. I'm not so sure that those people help me feel better about myself, perhaps quite the opposite. And perhaps the thing that worries me most about this is that this perfect Jake lacks humility. How can perfect Jake connect with people who aren't thinking, feeling, or behaving in perfect ways? His pride may be a barrier to developing a therapeutic alliance with many prospective clients. 100 years of psychological research reveals to us clearly that the most powerful therapeutic benefit of counseling or therapy is the therapeutic alliance between the client and the counselor. Without that part, Jake's not going to be a very effective counselor, which won't be good for his clients and won't be best for him either. There are some additional and significant problems with pride as well that are beyond the scope of this essay. As the telemarketers say, there's got to be a better way. After all, remember that Jennifer is staring at you, desperate for help as she pleads, "What should I do?" There's a better way, but that'll have to wait for another time and another blog.
Jennifer, what do you think you should do?
Oh, I like that.
I wonder, Jennifer, if... See? I am learning things as well from the blogs and Rick and Nick's excellent adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, so much to unpack here. I want to start real quick with the mention of humility, because that always resonates. Because I always liken any type of success back to From Good to Great, by Jim Collins, obviously. Where
great book.
One of the oh gosh, yeah. Even today, still. And one of the characteristics of that level 5 leadership is humility, which means so many different things, but in this case, and I hate to generalize. However, I guess I will to a degree, that in this current generation of people coming into the workforce, entering into the helping professions, there definitely seems to be more of a lack of humility than there's been in the past. So that in particular, amongst the other examples you provided, definitely struck a chord.
That's a good point, Nick, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but yeah, you mentioned that perhaps some of this is generational, and I wonder how much of this is connected to social media, which doesn't reward humility. It's quite the opposite, right? That we're almost trained, or this generation that has never known kind of life without the internet, without social media, that this is just what they're used to. That they put them best selves forward on social media, and they create an image, right? And again, perhaps quite the opposite of humility.
Yeah, and again, like you said, I don't want to get too far, off topic or towards just that one aspect of it because there's so many other pieces here. But it really, so much of it ties back to that notion. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
our own pride and beliefs in, I don't know, or maybe our ability to be right, and that it's always going to help or be the right thing for someone else. Which also goes back to the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule. So, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, no, because the way I want things is going to be a lot different than maybe what you need. So the do
Mm.
unto others as they would have, done unto themselves. Just to kind of like
I love
change that.
that yeah, that distinction there, Nick, and that requires empathy, right? That requires you to kind of, or what we call theory of mind, the ability to kind of put yourself in somebody else's position and imagine what would be most helpful. I talk often with my students about the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? That sympathy doesn't require that. It's just kind of self-centered. I feel bad because the person's hurting. But empathy is quite different. It's putting yourself in someone's position, imagining how they're feeling and what would be helpful and what wouldn't be helpful, not to you, but for them. And that's different, and it's much more powerful in the helping professions, and I think in education in general.
How many times, over the course of the episodes we've done already, have we talked about that probably more than that, 9.9 times out of 10, when people come to us, most times they are just seeking a listening ear and they don't
Mm-hmm.
even need or want a solution to their problems. They just need to vent and or say it out loud so they can hear it themselves and figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, Nick, you wrote a great blog a while back, and I actually just referred one of my students to go back and take a look at that blog. That sometimes what people need is a sounding board, a safe space to express themselves, and they'll receive a catharsis, right? That's a therapeutic benefit of just this idea of emotionally unloading. And I'm better. I'm good now. That's what I needed. I didn't need advice. I didn't need somebody to even really help me, other than just to hear me, right? To actually not just kind of, more than just hear, to understand, right? Hear me, to understand and to validate. That's what often people need in order to feel better and move forward. Yeah.
Which I think speaks to so much of what the positive of what your example is aiming to do. You know what I mean? Like we see Jake as our anti-example, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, but all of the things you just said really kind of like nail down. Yeah, that's probably the better approach. One quick example that when I was reading the blog initially that brought to mind was, I'm like, man, I love quotes, like wise wisdom quotes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you think about it, you're like, okay, like, especially on social media, like when you see people post quotes, sometimes you see that and you're like, hmm, okay, well, I wasn't asking for anyone for advice, but I guess that's, it's nice to see stuff like that. Which then brought me to, at the end of the school year, we always put a quote of some sort on our sign
Oh,
outside the building.
yeah.
And sometimes it's just funny, like, 86 days till school starts or whatever the number is. But I must have been feeling poetic or whatnot. So, I probably AI looked up for good quotes for the summer. And the gist of the quote we put up was essentially, we wait all week for the weekend. We wait all year for the holidays, or we wait all year for the summer. Don't wait, was essentially the quote we put up there.
I love that.
Maybe I spent a minute coming, like finding it on the internet, and in
Mm-hmm.
my mind, I was like, some of the kids will read it, but some of the parents leaving, when they're driving out on the last day, the bus drivers, maybe they'll see it, or if you're driving past in the summer, coming for one of those things, right? So in my mind, that's what that quote was going to spark or do. I got an email like 3 weeks later during the summer, not long before we actually went on the trip out west, from a retired community member who just happens to drive past our school every day,
Okay.
whose husband had passed away a year ago, and she met another widower, and they hit it off, and they really liked each other, and they kind of wanted to date, but people were telling them they shouldn't because it's too soon, this, that, and the other thing. And she saw our sign and decided, you know what? I'm not going to wait. We're going to date. And they had the quote printed on like a wooden Etsy sign, and she's emailed me like once a month with how this quote, changed her
Oh
life.
wow. Oh wow. That's cool.
All of this is to say, right? In my mind, right, in my Jake mind, I was like, here's a quote, and some people will see it. No clue, no idea whatsoever that this semi-random, tangentially, connected to the last day of school quote was going to have an impact so far away from what I ever could have anticipated the impact might have been, right? Whether that's dumb luck, whether that's, serendipity, any of the words you can pick. Not my intention. You know what I mean? Like, not looking to give advice, not thinking anything at all. And the impact it had was nothing even in the realm of what we were anticipating, which goes to speak to, I know in an sort of an off-centered type of way, what we're kind of getting at here. Like, Jake's intentions and his expectations are all one thing. The unintended consequences might not be as positive as the sign outside the building happened to be,
Right.
which speaks to everything you're saying in the blog.
Yeah, and the tough thing is that I think sometimes counselors not only come in wanting to do that and expecting that's what counseling is, but also that's kind of sometimes what people think they want when they come to counseling, right? A student or a client, and that they think that they think that's what counseling is as well. And you combine those two, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is just what's going to happen, right? And it requires significant restraint on the part of the counselor, therapist, or coach, or teacher, whatever, whoever it is, right? That leader that the person goes to. It requires significant restraint to kind of remind yourself that it's problematic to just kind of dole out the advice. There's better ways to do it, and I'm going to restrain myself from doing what maybe I feel like I want to do, and actually what's being kind of pulled and drawn from me, right? The student, the client is kind of fishing for this. But knowing that there's some real problems with it, and so kind of restraining yourself from doing it, taking a different approach.
Yeah, it's a good, regardless. It's always a good reminder, I think, because we all have some Jake in us.
Sure, that's
Or
a good
we
point
did at
too.
one point.
That's such a good point, Nick, because we're just saying that there are people like Jake, and that maybe they shouldn't even be counselors, but that's not true. I like the way we all have a little Jake in us, right? That we want to be able to kind of save the day once in a while, right? With some sage wisdom. And so, yeah, we can all just kind of be reminding ourselves to be intentional, to use restraint, and to kind of use a thoughtful approach that doesn't have quite so many pitfalls in it. And let me say this too, whether we're talking about kind of that part of ourselves, or we're talking about that personality type that I've described in Jake. Let me say, Jake is not a lost cause, right? He's got a heart for wanting to help. And that is incredibly valuable, right? So sometimes it's really kind of an educational process with folks who want to become counselors, so they better understand what counseling is and what it isn't. And when they understand that, and they understand the value in kind of taking a different approach, they can intentionally make different choices. And become very good counselors. And I've definitely seen that as well. So not a lost cause, but just something to keep in mind that, we need to be careful. And in my profession, to kind of make sure that we're providing that education to potential future counselors, and also be on the lookout for some of those, some of those dispositions that may or may not end up being a great fit long term. But whether it's a counselor or not, I think many educators, coaches, and that's part of our audience is for sure that we going to find ourselves in similar situations, and we ought to be thoughtful about how we respond to those.
Yeah, it's a lot to always think about and consider, for sure. And how many times do we also say, be careful of the questions you ask, because you might get an answer
Mm.
you didn't want or you don't like, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I went slightly once again off topic. We had a situation at school today, as middle schoolers are wont to do. Sometimes they were playing the pantsing game, which has made a comeback in 2024. Pantsing, and I had the group, sitting at my conference table with me, and I said, what are some of the things that could happen by playing this game? And I was expecting, I guess I didn't know what I was expecting, but the answer I got was very interesting. The one child said, someone could trip and fall, potentially hit their head, causing a CTE, which could be long-lasting brain trauma for the rest of their lives. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. I was thinking, you might pull both layers of pants down by accident and expose
Yeah.
things you didn't want to see. But
Yeah.
you really went whole other direction there. Okay. That's not where I thought we were headed, but again, I guess it was a leading question once again.
Yeah.
Well, excellent blog and good philosophy and reminders for anyone thinking about going into the helping fields, for sure. With multiple good characteristics and points to consider.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate the chance to talk about it as well.
All right. And we will be back with more shortly.